Welcome to Python function arguments. First, we'll take a quick revision on functions. We'll learn about different types of arguments, like keyword arguments and default arguments. We'll use them together. Then we'll see a gotcha, and then talk of arbitrary arguments. A function is a sequence of statements to execute in a given order. Instead of writing the same code 100 times, we can run a function to execute it 100 times. We can give it a name and use this name later to reuse this code. This function prints hello as indicated by the docstring. When we call this function, it prints out hello. This one adds two values. Calling it on the values 2 and 3 adds them to return 5. Calling it on a single value raises a type error since the function takes exactly two values. 2 and 3 in the previous example were arguments. By now, you know arguments are the values a function can take to operate on. But apart from positional arguments, these are three different kinds. Let's begin with keyword arguments. This function takes in three values and adds the third to the division of the first two. Values of 3, 2 and 1 result in 2. But think of a scenario where a function takes about 10 arguments and you forget to provide some of those, or even that you just can't remember the order of the arguments. To this function func, we can explicitly declare A is 3, B is 2 and C is 1. These are keyword arguments. This lets us put the arguments in any order, removing the headache of remembering the order of arguments. Even this works. It takes the value of 3 for A, and then B and C are keyword arguments with the values 2 and 1. We can use as many keyword arguments as we want. But this function call gives us a syntax error. If there's one thing you should remember with keyword arguments, you should not put non-keyword or positional arguments after them. Positional arguments are the ones for which the value is taken for whatever variable is where the value is. What happens when a function takes two arguments but you only give it one? If we provide default values to arguments while defining the function, it will use that value for that argument if we do not provide any. This function prints out hello and appends the user's name to it. The default value for this is user. This call prints out hello Ayushi. This one has no argument, so it takes the default value and uses that for name. And as with keyword arguments, you cannot put non-default arguments after default ones. Let's see why. Here, A is a default argument and B is non-default. This is a syntax error. Now, even if you could do this and then say made a call to sum of 3, it would take 3 for A, not for B. It would be clueless about B. So we know not to put non-keyword arguments after keyword ones or non-default arguments after the default ones. Default arguments are how we define a function and keyword arguments are how we call it. So we can use the two together. This function has two default arguments. This call to it has a non-keyword argument A and the keyword argument B, but that's okay. This one has a non-default argument A and a default argument B. A call to it with just one keyword argument is fine because it takes 3 for A and B defaults to 4. So this prints out 3 plus 4, which is 7. So far, no problems with the default argument. But see this. To-do is a default argument with the value of an empty list. It takes an item and appends it to to-do. If we call it with the argument macaroni, it appends this to an empty list. Now call it with the argument cheese. This should give us this list, right? But it doesn't. It appends cheese to this list, which is not empty anymore, and returns this list with two items, mac and cheese. This goes to show that it doesn't use a new empty list every time, but keeps appending to the same. Gotcha. A third type of arguments we have is arbitrary arguments. These are of two kinds, args and quarks. When you don't know how many arguments a function will receive in the future, you use args. This helps us define functions of uncertain arity. But you can call it anything. This code takes in any number of names and then prints out hello to each of them. We don't know how many names we'll receive. If we now make a call to this function with the names of 3 singers, it adds these names to a tuple, then takes these one by one to print the greeting to. Now, if you can use an asterisk when defining a function, you can also use it when calling the function. This code takes in multiple arguments, and the call to it takes a list. The asterisk helps convert it into multiple individual values. So this gives us 1, 2, and 3. This one has no arbitrary arguments, but takes a range object and an asterisk, and the arguments become 2 and 3, adding which the result is 5. And this one takes in a default argument and an arbitrary. The call to it only has positional arguments, and this works too. Finally, quarks. This is for an arbitrary number of keyword arguments. One difference from args is that args uses a tuple to fill in values, but quarks uses a dictionary to hold the keywords and their values. This code has the arbitrary keyword argument catalog. Again, you can call it anything. Say we pass to it 2 keyword arguments. This creates a dictionary with these values. The call to this function takes these values and prints them one by one. That's all for function arguments. We studied 3 of these: keyword, default, and arbitrary. We also talked of positional arguments.